das YouTube-Livestreaming. Wer nicht auftauchen will, einfach das Mikro stumm lassen. Hello and welcome out there on YouTube. This is our live streaming and we are heading for the keynote with Benni Mack. I'll ask you to have a little bit of patience until Vienna is ready with the session planning, which will be at approximately in some minutes. So have a little patience. See you in a little while. Hello, Vienna. If you want to talk to us, please unmute yourself. Okay. Hello, Vienna. Hello, everybody on YouTube. We are now heading for our keynote from today with Benni Mack. And I'd like to give a warm welcome to Benni Mack. Benni, the stage is yours.
Hi, thanks a lot. One moment. I hope you can see my screen. If you can, just give me some.
Perfect. Go ahead.
Okay. Perfect. So thanks for having me again as a keynote speaker. Today, I want to talk about TYPO3, of course, and TYPO3 core development and my thoughts on what has affected my thoughts and my process on how to develop TYPO3 further in the past and for the future. And I called this Living on the Edge. Some older folks of you might have heard of that claim. If you've listened to hard rock music in the 90s, then this keynote might sound familiar to you. So let's get started. I believe there's something wrong with the TYPO3 world today. And you might ask, why is that? Why is Benni saying something like that? Well, because if we look at what happened in the last 5 years, you might think, well, we've achieved a lot of really cool things. And I personally completely agree with that, because that was back then when Matthias Schreiber and myself dedicated ourselves to work like massively all time on TYPO3 on the new versions. And we started with version 7, which if I still need to update version 6 to version 7, I'm always amazed how, much nicer the TYPO3 backend looks, and also how it feels, because it's, in my opinion, much faster. We integrated fluid style content. We cleaned up a lot of things, so it felt much more streamlined when using TYPO3, and we came up with a unified release cycle with these, minor versions and the LTS version at the end, and the 1.5 years release cycle. And then version 8 came, and we integrated the form framework. And the form framework finally is something I'm really happy to have that in TYPO3 core, because if you ever worked with other systems like WordPress, or where you install a third-party plugin for creating a form, and it feels very hacky if you need to extend it. Form framework is really cool to see that you can build simple forms. It has a really cool UI for editors, but also it's extensible under the hood, where, as you see at the camp, there's a presentation about how you can extend the form framework to be actually a shopping cart for your website, which is amazing to do something like that. And then we also integrated the CK editor. That helped us a lot to not worry about, our own RTE. It felt much nicer to use. It's faster, and we also had a huge range of platform or like browser compatibility with the CK editor. And version 8 also brought the Doctrine database abstraction layer. Before you wrote your SQL database statements, and it was always, or most of the time, SQL injection for security reasons to where there might be an issue. And this is all, or not all of it solved, but it has a much nicer API to use. Plus, we now support not just MySQL and MariaDB, but also Postgres, MS SQL, Microsoft Server, and SQLite with version 9. And we test this, with every change, that everything still works as expected, which is really, really cool. And I see I see a lot of, or a few actually installations or people I talk to that use Postgres by default or SQLite. And that's cool to see that actually it does work. Before we had our own kind of abstraction layer and it was really slow. And then we also included Fluid as a standalone component and brought it through the majority of the TYPO3 core. And then version 9 came, that was 2018, where we finally brought native speaking URLs or routing or site handling, whatever you want to call it. It covered a lot of things that were difficult to manage before. And now we don't even need a third-party extension. That's my personal favorite. To tell people, well, you know, how do I use TYPO3 the right way? And it's like, oh, you always need to have cool URI or real URL, and you don't have to do that anymore. Plus, all the SEO extension and the redirects extensions were something that we can just tell people, well, it's shipped with TYPO3 by default. You don't have to worry about it anymore, and it's configured nicely out of the box. And this year in April, version 10 came out. We have now, a cool dashboard where people can extend it and build their own widgets. We have events. We have a lot of other things for the developers to unify the systems and also to bring XBase, which kind of has its own ecosystem, closer together to the rest of the TYPO3 core. And looking back at the last 5-6 years, it feels like that we've overall improved, and I call it the refactoring era. Overall improved the refactoring for or the code base, which is great. We've removed a lot of our own, TYPO3 lives in its bubble thing, and replaced it with standards, with PSRs, with Symfony components. And looking back at version 6.2, TYPO3 core can do so much more just by using the core, which is amazing. And it's all streamlined. That means, oh, yeah, right, you need to have marker-based templates here, and you need to understand this, and here you need to know Fluid, and you can't do it there and there. That was difficult, and we went through a lot of transformation. And that's actually when I think I sometimes feel like I should cry, because this transformation and this refactoring felt like it's a good thing and it was a necessary thing, but feels like there's something off with it. And I noticed, because people talk to me, of course, and tell me, hey, there's so much stuff going on, so many changes, so many functionality that has changed. My old stuff does not work as before, even though we still have a really good update strategy, and I still have installations working on version 9 and 10, which never, which started with version 4.2, and you can update and you can keep your content, which is cool. But feels like customers and agencies couldn't keep up with the upgrades because it's so fast. And looking at the past, what was the biggest struggles was mostly related to this doctrine change and the URL handling in version 9, which are just not a one-to-one replacement, but actually new technology or a new way of developing. Plus, a lot of feedback I got was like, hey, previously I could do configure something like this or like this and like this, and now we're, especially with the site handling, we're going with some best practices and guide people more towards how people should use TYPO3, and that's something that people who upgrade sometimes don't like, but it's a necessary step. But still, it doesn't feel right. So it's time to learn from these mistakes. I mean, mistakes not in a way that, well, maybe we could have done it differently. It's easy to talk about this, years later. But at the time, and also still now, I think it was necessary to do these things. But let's see how we can avoid doing these changes. So I asked myself, what were the big impacts? And of course, there were so many changes, and maybe we didn't have to do too many of these, and especially of the breaking changes. Were they really necessary? And you usually only find that out, years after you've released version 9. That was 2018, 2 years ago, that people come up with like, now I want to update and I still have issues, and I'm like, oh man, these use cases would have been great to see if we could have done it differently. And at the same time, if I also read the news for the new versions, it's like I have these right, like there are so many changes under the hood, but there's nothing, or like only a few things that are really that make an impact, that make people want to upgrade. And with all this refactoring in mind, we knew we had our roadmap. We knew we wanted to improve TYPO3, but we did not always compare our feature set and our usability to the competition. And that were the things I think we could have done differently. And at the same time, I talked about this previously, a syndrome I called developer-driven product development. So I'm a developer, but at the same time, it shouldn't be like that developers are the ones who decide on what, or only decide what should go into the next version. Because what happened was people asked me, why should I upgrade? What's the benefit here? Oh, you have your website secure and all these kind of things. And it's the developers are refactoring things, and now like this module looks the same as before, but it's breaking stuff under the hood, but it didn't give you a direct benefit for the end users. So we, as developers, sometimes don't know how people actually use TYPO3, or people who actually don't use TYPO3 yet, or don't know TYPO3 yet, how they would expect TYPO3 to behave. So that's the developer-driven syndrome, which I found that's something we need to improve. So I felt this for quite some time, and I feel, or not just that I feel, but I also see that we've made a huge improvements in version 10 until the LTS release, because version 9 and version 10 is a really smooth upgrade. I upgraded a version 8 to version 9 project, and it took me like 30% of the time to upgrade from version 9 to 10. Also, this refactoring era showed me that version 10 had much fewer changes that you need to adapt when you upgrade. Well, we added a lot of cool things, but we did not reinvent most of the things. We just extended it properly, or cleaned some few things up. And we also avoided the breaking changes from last July when we released 10.0 to the LTS version. And that increases trust, because people now know that they actually can use a non-LTS version already if they have a longer project, and do that. That's what we talked about, I don't know, maybe in version 8 already, but now we see that it's actually working. And we also see that there's so many extensions that are compatible with version 10 because the upgrade path is easy. And then there's tools like Rector that can help developers to migrate their extensions properly, which is great. So the ecosystem sees that, and we know that we're on the right track here. But at the same time, I have to tell you that I'm amazed so many times to see how thriving our community is, because there's so many people asking questions, but they also get nice answers, and not some stupid comments like, oh, how stupid are you? Why don't you know that? But actually, it's very helpful, very friendly, on Stack Overflow, in Slack. And there are a lot of blogs explaining technologies and how to do things right, which is really cool. We have this extension scanner technology, and in TYPO3 core to help going through the upgrades for people who don't know PHP. Actually, TYPO3 became so powerful back then in the early 2000s because you didn't need to know PHP. That's some really powerful, in my opinion, USP of TYPO3 from back then that we should embrace again. That people can use TYPO3 without need to know, like, you need to do PHP the right way or something like that. That's for instance why you can configure your site it doesn't matter if it's writing YAML files or whatever, but you can use a UI for that. But you can also do that as a developer in the source code. And at the same time, our community, I see a pattern that extension authors start again to support multiple TYPO3 core versions for their extensions, because it's easier now with version 9 and version 10 to support both of them at the same time is totally doable without a lot of effort. Take the crawler extension, for instance. The major issue was to upgrade to version 9, but then supporting version 9 and 10, no big deal. And that's one of my recommendations for you if you're an extension author. Go with that route, because maybe it's a few hours or more work for you, but I'm also updating TYPO3 installations. And if I know I only need to update core, but this extension works with both versions, that saves me a lot of time. And that's really, really cool. So everything looking forward is actually amazing. It's and if I sum up what my thoughts were or my learnings from the past, is that the things we now need to do also, not just for core development, but also as a community, because everybody should be involved in that. It's fairly simple, and that's basically to do our homework. All of us need to listen to the users, the editors and the decision makers, what they actually need, not just what they want, but actually what they need and how they use TYPO3. I always have a trade-off between, should we include a new feature or should we fix a bug? And if we fix bugs, then a lot of people are happy, because that's something that the software is not doing properly. Instead of adding more and more new things, it's much more healthier for TYPO3 to fix the bugs that are annoying, and that where people need to find workarounds, and maybe 10 people in 10 different companies need to find the same workarounds instead of just fixing this one bug. And the editors are happy if they, don't see these bugs because they're gone. Then looking for the new features, there's still so many feature requests on our ticketing system. It's great to see that we can actually, because we've done the refactoring, work on the new features in a proper way, which we can now do. I solved feature requests. I don't know, the one was from Patrick Lohbacher, I think like 12 years ago, and it was so easy now, and it wasn't technically possible with version 7 or 8. So that was really cool. But also part of the homework, it's not just on the development part, it's also that we need to talk about how we use TYPO3 and how we use TYPO3 with features that it's not just for a simple website or a complex website, but also how people use TYPO3 in a way that we never thought, or that I never thought TYPO3 could be used. It's a content management system, and content could be anything, right? Complex data structures, simple text with image, pages structures, but also media, and yeah, the workflows. I consider the permission system, for instance, is something really powerful that people just take for granted for years. And taking that and include that in blogs or in documentation for newcomers as guides is really important. I'm very much looking forward for the TYPO3 book that should support exactly this topic. And the homework does not just reside on, or like, it's not just, okay, well, we lack this feature or this feature. We actually, TYPO3 has these enterprise USPs, our selling points. These are really diamonds in the rough, diamonds that we don't know that we have, and we need to polish them. So one of my favorite topics, of course, is these days is workspaces, because I didn't like workspaces because it was buggy, the UX was complicated, and it just didn't feel right. But the whole, reviewing process, or actually having content that I want to preview before I, see it online for everybody, is something that I would say every editor would love to have, where I have content in a draft and I can preview it. And we actually have it since 2006. And we never took the energy to finish that or make it bug-free. So my company, for instance, we applied for budget at the TYPO3 Association to fix most, or not most of it, but a lot of the workspaces issues, and also of the old issues that were there, people reported years ago, and fix them, and fix 150 issues for TYPO3. And it's just not new features, it's actually just stabilizing the product. The other USP, and I mean, there's so many USPs, is the file abstraction layer, where people go crazy with, hey, I can store my whole file admin stuff in AWS, and they do that, and it works for them since version 7 or 8. And it's kind of, well, it's there, but we didn't embrace it. We don't talk about it in a way what you can actually do with it. You can create adapters to document asset management systems, and that's really cool to see a digital asset management system. Sorry, to see that you can actually do a nice integration. Having feedback, what is missing there or what we can improve, would be really, really beneficial. So, talk to me, talk to each other, write blog posts. What do you actually do with the features that TYPO3 has? And as I mentioned, the permission handling is super flexible. And maybe there are just a few things missing to make it even much better. Didn't mention it, but version 10 has a permission comparison system now again for backend users to compare what can the one backend user do and the other, and have it really nicely built side by side, but also for groups. And that's really cool. But then that's the enterprise USPs, or the USPs that we have. Then we also have the user experience. And although it's, people would say, it's fine, it's structured, I know my way around. How cool would it be to have UX experts look at TYPO3 and find ways to save one click for each and every editor for common things they do on every day? Of course, I'm not talking about the save and close issue here in specifics, but like, if there's a way to just make life easier, why wouldn't we just pick that up and do it? Because everybody would love to have this new version where you just are much faster doing your job and can go back drinking coffee. So I'd love to see that TYPO3, the UX feels like a web application, a software that's state of the art, and how people use the web in 2020 and not like 2005. So I'm pretty sure what we're going to achieve with the user experience in version 11 will be really, really amazing and great. And then the other thing is that if new people come to TYPO3, and we've heard it yesterday and also later today, if we increase the adoption rate, we should and must make it easier for people to get started with TYPO3. Maybe we should have a default template. Maybe we should include something like the Kickstarter, what we had back then, to get going and to customize your system much more and flexible. Maybe it's not like the solution that the enterprise users want, or like, the PHP developers who want to write everything in PHP, they should would do that. But also maybe it's just for people who just want to use a stable and secure system that's supported for a long time. instead of looking for alternatives, because it's faster. And speaking of long support, I mean, we have the 3 years, which is great, but then we also have the ELTS, which saved us from, or like sustained this refactoring era where we went on very fast and had a lot of breaking changes, but people had the option to keep their old version through ELTS. And that's really cool. That's the ELTS and TYPO3 GmbH really helps giving people the option to decide what they need and what they how much money they can afford to keep an old version or upgrade. And I mean, people say, well, 3 years might be short for a free version, but if you look at all the web technologies that have evolved in the past decade, you see the whole, JavaScript stuff, and there are so many new things popping up. And one of the reasons, for instance, why we haven't included a JavaScript framework right now, a large JavaScript framework like React or Vue.js currently, is because we don't know how long they're supported by their community, because we need to make sure that we supported at least 3 years and TYPO3 GmbH for another 3 years with browser support and whatever you want to do. And that's just so fast. So thinking of this mindset, you actually hopefully see that the 3 years and the 6 years in total are huge, like very, very long time. And that's really cool that we actually have the technology that continues, but is not like something that comes up and 2 years later it's dead because their community is dead. So if we've been living on the edge for the past, which had some hurdles, and I encourage you actually to live on the edge again, because what I try to achieve with version 11, and not just myself, but we as a community, is actually that the upgrades will be smoother than before. And then people actually, but at the same time also see that there's a benefit for upgrading. And then they can again decide what version they want to stick to. Because for version 11, we need to increase the system requirements. We can't support very, very old PHP versions because PHP versions don't have support anymore. And we use Symfony components and a few others where we also need to keep up with that and see how their LTS versions overlap with ours. Same goes with the databases, and we also see what kind of operating systems support what database versions and these kind of things. So we need to make changes here, but I also think it's easier than in the past. So version 11, hopefully, will have a lot of cool improvements for the user experience. Is planned for October 21, and my main goal is that I want people that they actually decide to call you up and say, I want this new version because that sounds exactly what I need or what I can build on. So give me the latest version, doesn't matter what it takes. If we get to this point that that people actually see this benefit in the new versions, it's because it's not just refactoring, because it's actually it makes their lives easier. Then we're at a point where TYPO3 should be, which I call eat the rich, because the enterprise CMS market is still very old-fashioned. And I'm not talking about, other open source systems here, because I'm also had the opportunity to talk to people who don't use an open source content management system, but they actually spend a lot of money for licenses. And it's still the case in 2020. And especially in times like these with COVID, it's like, why, if everybody has to cut their budgets, they should cut their budgets on this stupid license for corporate CMSs or for commercial CMSs, sorry, and should put their money to the TYPO3 agencies and tell us what features they're missing out. Because I don't think there's still features that TYPO3 doesn't have, but most of the commercial systems don't have it either. So it's always, again, custom made. But for TYPO3, it can benefit the whole community. So TYPO3 should, strive for eating the rich, eating the ones that spend tons of money for the wrong solutions. And by doing that, it's really beneficial if TYPO3 starts to talk to other platforms in a much easier way. For instance, with COVID, I mean, Microsoft Teams is not just in corporations anymore. We use it for video conferencing, or not just Microsoft Teams, but Google and Zoom. We use it for schools and at work. And wouldn't it be cool to integrate TYPO3 in Microsoft Teams, for instance, in a way that TYPO3 lets Teams know if there's a change that's released or published within your website. So it's a notification system. So it should be easy because others do it as well. And things that matter for the enterprises, before, matter for us, for the rest of us, I would say, as well, more than ever. And if I talk about security and privacy, I personally want, in GDPR, I want a secure system that I can trust and build trust on, because I leave my data in there and I know it's safe, and I know it gets removed or properly evaluated, and TYPO3 has that. That's what enterprises cared about, on the paper at least, for quite some time, and we do as well. So actually, our enterprise CMS is something that matters for all of us. Plus, and that's the key ingredient that the other commercial systems don't have. We have a striving community. We have a community where we support each other, we help each other out if there's a question, but also because we are decentralized systems, and or like a community where we can build new things because somebody needs it, and not because somebody has a great idea, and not because this huge corporation is spending millions for a license. So that shows me that our community, the TYPO3 community, we can innovate like crazy, reevaluate what people are using in 2020. Developers can fix the buggy areas. People who don't develop could actually sponsor developers. People who don't develop can spread the word, which is super important, because most of the people who haven't heard of TYPO3 might try it out because they're like, oh, that's solving that issue. I have that. Maybe we should use TYPO3. So you can start initiatives, or for instance, my colleagues from the UX department, they started creating mock-ups for how the backend UX should be more intuitive, come up with ideas, come up with drafts. And these are the things that our community can do in a very flexible manner, but sustained by the TYPO3 Association, because we know it's not just random people there, but it's all getting together. So we can actually be really proud of the fact that we have a community and build these kind of things. So for me, to sum it up, living on the edge is really something positive, because it shows us we're the ones who can innovate. We're the ones in open source with a community. We can build the trust in open source to use that in a good way. And living on the edge doesn't mean that you have to have the beta versions or whatever. It's actually something that we we can think of things that we can build together and start off and just try it out. So if you have any questions, I'm done with the presentation. Let me know.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Benni, for this inspiring kickoff. Do we have questions here? Please come to me. Hi, Benni. Can you see me?
Hi. Yes.
Up here. Hi. I think you had a similar talk at the Tech Summer, I guess. And I'm into this make it easier for non-developers into the getting into the system with default templates. You know, yeah, you know it. Basically, I just wanted to say it out loud without having a 45 minutes talk. If you know anyone who needs to onboard into TYPO3, I just wanted to repeat, we offer free installation. So if you know someone, small business owners, whatever, just send them over, and yeah, usually they get the installation within 15 minutes. So it's simply for onboarding. And yesterday I had that spontaneous certified editor test, which I didn't want to make, and I found out I have to just synchronize the editor certification with our to-do system. So if I get that done, maybe this helps, and maybe we can work on a basic template. I think that's what we do for the last 4 years. So maybe we can have a chat.
Definitely.
If that would help you, because I saw you have simply core staff right now, right?
I have one.
You hired basically core developers, and you're dedicated 100% of the time.
Yeah, there's Christian Kuhn working for us since July, and Oliver Bartsch working for us since September. Most of it right now fixing bugs, and then continuing over to improve version 11 in exactly the things that I mentioned. Yeah. Because they're so huge tasks, it's not always easy to do that in your spare time, and so you can actually build good projects out of it and do that. Yeah, so yeah, that would be an option to do that.
Maybe we can join. Maybe we should see each other.
Yeah.
One day or the other. All right.
Yeah.
I saw Mattes writing something in the chat. What did he do?
Yes, there's also budget that I applied for building a demo typo3.org to that resets itself every 30 minutes for people to try it out and get hooked with TYPO3. So all these things really matter for me.
Okay, maybe we will look into it, because I think we just have to synchronize our themes and with the basic content elements. Maybe this can work. Let's see. Yep. I just want to say, yeah, I'll get in touch with you. Nice. Thank you. And wait, I have to cover. Go. Okay. Roland is here. A moment.
Hello, Benni.
Hi.
I see a lot of job offers, and they every time ask for senior developers, 5 years experience, 3 years experience, and the market seems that you need a lot of experience for TYPO3 or for any kind of our PHP or developer jobs. How can we improve the education of junior developers to bring them up faster, to make this more rentable, to work faster in bigger projects and teams?
Can you repeat the last sentence? How can you make it more?
How can we how can is there 2 microphones? Okay, how can we bring up them faster to get better education and to get better experience to make not only junior tasks, so say auf Augenhöhe kommen?
Yeah, I think that's first we need to lower the barrier, because the whole senior developer thing, I personally think it's stupid, because in my opinion, senior developers only have more experience. Doesn't mean they write better code. But at the same time, what do junior developers do? They look for advice, they look for best practices, they look for solutions. And I think the whole community, and I mean, you do a great job there, is teaching. It doesn't matter if it's a junior developer or a senior developer, teaching others what's the best practice or what's the right way to do it. Combine, like with videos, with blog series, with you know, talking about why certain things are the way they are, because that's what matters to them. If they look for a solution and at the same time find not just the solution but also the why, they're like, ah, that makes sense. Now I understand it. It's not just I solved my problem, but actually I know why I solved it like this. And we can do a much better job. I mean, we already do, but you know, just creating more content on what to do is, in my opinion, the key to tell people, well, creating the content, but also making it more like appealing for others to dig into it, because it's like, oh, TYPO3, that's like this old system and it's all complicated. That doesn't feel right. So if you look, for instance, at I look at other PHP frameworks, for instance, with Laravel. Everybody's building stuff off of Laravel because it seems so easy to get going. And so we need to also lower the barrier. So these are the two things I would say.
Thank you, Benny. There is Mattes here, remote with us, and he has an opinion on that too. Mattes, go ahead.
Does the mic work?
Yes, it does.
Okay, cool. So when we started within the TYPO3 company, I wanted to try out something different other than what I did during agency days. And to us, at least it works for us. I'm not saying it works for everyone. But time is a huge factor, meaning that we plan with quite a lot of headroom. We give new developers time to make mistakes, but then analyze those mistakes within the team with an experienced person who always has their backs, and the results are a lot better than what I used to deliver in the old company, definitely. So in terms of how do we get developers up to speed, I think that Benni and the rest of the team is doing a really great job at making things easier and streamline things. So I mean, we're currently not hiring PHP. Sorry, we're not hiring TYPO3 developers specifically. We're hiring PHP developers, and the amount of work or time that it takes to onboard them into TYPO3 is drastically less than it used to be 5 years ago, and for sure a ton of time less than it used to be 10 years ago. Yet we still give the developers enough time to do their stuff. We have the thing that we call Anything Goes Friday, which technically means that every employee, every developer can do whatever the fuck they want on a Friday, as long as it somehow benefits TYPO3 as a whole. So it doesn't have to benefit the company, whatever. So there's people working on the blog extension. Last Friday, we had one of the new UX people that we hired just take a look at the reimbursement tool and streamlining that, make it easier to use. And this kind of gives them a sense of fulfillment, and they're happy to see their stuff out on the road. So translating that to agency work, I strongly recommend doing something like that where people can just work on core, for example, or have them work on documentation, or maybe there's an extension that you maintain which could use a little bit more love than it has gotten in the past half year, something like that. That would be my recipe that at least worked for us. Give people more time, give people a meaning to pursue in their job. And the thing is, you could argue that something, they spend like a Friday on something not necessarily client related, but it's an investment. Your developers get better at what they do. They have a more fulfilled way of doing their things. They love working for the company, and your project quality improves. This is or the code quality and the project quality that you deliver improves over time, because people have the time to actually try out things, do things the new way, and don't work by communist planned workflows that are always the same for every project. Because imagine that you have like the standard project template that you're using for 5 years, 10 years. What if you're wrong? So I'd strongly recommend giving people the time to experiment with stuff and pair them up with experienced people. This results in this yields great results for us.
Okay, thanks. I have a question to Benni. This list of improvements you presented, is this something like an agenda or just first ideas of you?
For the things, the USPs? Or
no, you had this list of improvement of the workspace and these things for
that's just a list that came to my mind. It's not a agenda in a way that I go step by step for that. However, for the workspaces, we're looking into together with Olivier to improve that feature and make it shine. But for the others, there's no agenda in that way. And I'm also pretty sure that there are other things I didn't mention. For instance, the structured content part to create content elements faster is certainly also an important topic. Yeah, there's so many things. The whole translation part could be, really benefit from having, proper documentation so people know when to use what, and streamlining and looking at all the bugs and fixing these kind of things. So you can take most of the topics that TYPO3 has and take that and make it shine. Most of them that are really heavily used, I would say. So that's sometimes I have this feeling because I look through, there's 2,000 open issues in our ticketing system, and more than I don't know. I mean, there's like 150 for workspaces, but then there's also some file abstraction layer, and they sometimes go together. And you, instead of just taking this and this, you need to take a priority. And there's a good feeling for what is missing or what can be improved drastically.
Okay, then to summarize it up, this is something like a strategy for upcoming versions to improve the features and not focusing on too many new features. Is this something that I can summarize?
I wouldn't say so, because that would also mean, again, like the whole refactoring reason was also that we just improved things. But actually, we want to make the things that partially work either make it work completely and streamline this part. But of course, there will be, but taking the UX functionality or the UX area, there's a lot of parts that that are not defined in Forge, for instance. So in this case, you would actually need to come from the UX perspective, come up with mockups or click dummies and see how it behaves, and talk to editors and see if that matches, and then go from there. I give you an example. For instance, there's the template module. I hope everybody of you have heard of the template module, and it's been there since I know TYPO3, and it's actually right now, I would say it's called the TYPOScript template module, and not because there's no fluid in there, and there's nothing. We've included fluid, but we never built such features that you actually have everything about templates in this one place. So either we rename the template module to TYPOScript, or we build something else around it, and that streamlines everything, and that would be something new. So so it's not just focusing on the Forge issues, but actually on looking also from the outside perspective. That doesn't make sense, or that was because of 15 years ago, and now today we should actually change it, drastically change it from a user perspective.
Maybe somebody please just build a cool, funky, fun to use constant editor, right? It's a constrained thing. It's something that you can open as an extension, build your things. There's next to no side effects. There's nothing else you can break. There's no data handler involved whatsoever. Why not build something like that? It helps everyone. And then people could use, I mean, if you take a look at that from a historical perspective, the principle of the constant editor is brilliant, right? You provide a default template and you have variables. This is why it's called constant editor, so stupid, but you have variables that you can change. You can do stuff with colors, mix and match things together. If you take a look at the amount of constants, for example, that the Bootstrap package has, I think it's like 400. And you can basically configure your entire Bootstrap package without writing a single line of code. How's that for onboarding for new people? Fire up your TYPO3 install. There's a default template coming out, and all you need to do is go into that constant editor, change a couple things around, and you're good to go, right? And that's where everybody's complaining, like, oh, WordPress is so easy to use and TYPO3 is so hard. No, it's not. Right, and this is easy things to do, and the most important thing is I do understand that people are intimidated by the complexity of core. I absolutely get that, but there's so many things that are isolated and working within a confined space where you simply can't break stuff. Sorry, go ahead.
Thanks, Matthias. So what about, Norbert is coming up. One moment, please.
Hey, Benni.
Hi.
I have a question regarding breaking changes in minor releases in LTS versions, because TYPO3 9.5 LTS has not a really good record regarding breaking changes in the minor releases. And we also stumbled 2 or 3 times upon a very, very little change somewhere that has to cause problems in a totally different area. How do you would like to tackle that for 10 and 11?
That's first. There's the topic of what's defined as a breaking change. So I think I mentioned this before. It's like if there's something that's not,
it's not an interface break, but it's a semantical change.
Yeah, if it was misbehaving before and it's fixing something, then that's totally legitimate.
Yeah,
but I think
it should be fixed. That's okay.
Yeah, and I think what you're referring to is like the side effects.
Yeah.
And I'm aware of that, and that's what I also meant with the mistakes. I really feel like version 9, when it was finished, because we had this huge task of the URL handling, was not properly finished in a way that you could use it right now, and that stumbled into these issues that that we now have, and we revert and we fix something else. And I personally would like to say, okay, certain things misbehave, for instance, in version 9, and that's how it is. And that's how it's going to stay, because we're only fixing it in the next version. Because then you need to X class or whatever, because the worst case happened with version 9.5.15 or 17 again, where you just want to upgrade and something doesn't work anymore. So instead of fixing everything in version 9 as we tried, because we felt like it wasn't, you know, shaped properly, I think it's better to say some things just won't work in version 9 and will be finished properly in version 10 or version 11, and taking this case now. So yes, that's one of my learnings too. I don't want to break version 9 anymore.
Okay, understood. I have another point. What you've said, Laravel is very successful at the moment. And to be more precise, Laravel is taking over the PHP framework area and leaving Symfony far behind. So from that point of view, and from the perspective that we are as IMEOs are very successful in the Laravel area too, because it's so easy, and it's also so easy to install IMEOs and to get a complete job. I personally think using Symfony, so the whole Symfony framework or the dependency injection container from Symfony is a mistake, because it's far too complicated. If you have a look at how Laravel it does, it's much better. It's much easier. It's much easier to understand. Much easier to handle for developers. I know Symfony has its advantages, and Symfony has a lot of very, very good components, which also Laravel is using. But from a personal point of view, the Symfony framework itself is far too complicated and far too complex. So,
what's the question?
Yeah,
I'm waiting.
yeah, that was my statement. Like, the question
Yes.
now is, are you going to integrate Symfony, the Symfony framework itself, deeper and deeper into TYPO3?
The answer is no. I think for the dependency injection, it was either we use Symfony or we build it our own. And we decided to go with Symfony because it had actually a few things that we like and made our lives easier. But we wanted to, there's Pimple, and we thought about using a different container mechanism, but also at the same time we try to cover, or like we use a component, but we don't expose it that much in a way that it's recommended to build it. At the same time, for the container system, Benjamin Franzke and me are considering creating a standards group or with others to find a better way to handle the common ground for containers and build upon that and actually see what we're using. And in terms of your statement regarding Symfony, there's a few design parts that are not compatible with our way of thinking that we for the whole HTTP process that we decide, or I won't integrate the full Symfony bundle into TYPO3.
Okay. Last question. You also said it should be much easier to onboard new users, especially offering them, for example, a complete working system with templates and so on. From our point of view, currently there's one problem. There are TYPO3 distributions which are great, but since TYPO3 9, we have some new root enhancers and also support for the extensions. So routing in TYPO3 9 and 10 is very good. So
Thanks.
root enhancers for the plugins are rather rough. And I've also created a ticket regarding that stuff, and Oliver Harder fixed a lot of things, but it's still rough. And compared to TYPO3 8 with RealWell, which we all don't want to get back again, had one advantage that you could ship as an extension a default rule set for nice URLs, which is not possible at the moment in 9 and 10 because you have to put that into the site configuration, and there's no way of loading that from the extension and binding that, for example, to a subtree. Is there some plans to enhance the root enhancers?
Yeah, rough or like rough plans or ideas, and something we wanted to do is similar to how you add TypoScript stuff from an extension. Would be cool to go into your site configuration and say include IMEOs and add this as import statements.
Exactly.
It's on a planning phase, but not actively developed at the moment. But I see your point, and I also heard it from a few others.
Okay, so I'm hoping for release 11.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
So, anyone else? Feedback, questions? Your chance now. Take his chance. Okay, Peter.
Thank you very much, Benni, for this great keynote. Thank you very much for all your questions and the discussions. We'll stop the live stream on YouTube now. You'll see the next live stream with our first session, which will be starting in about 20 minutes with Daniel. And happy to see you then. If you want to join us on Zoom, feel very welcome. Then you can take part in discussions and interactions rather than just hanging out there on YouTube and being passive. It's much more fun in here. Until the next session, you have the chance to network and chit-chat with people online here in Zoom. So see you in about 20 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Benni. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Thanks for listening.